Hey guys, me again, Steve here, Blossom Racing. This video today is going to be about 33 millimeter carburetors. This carburetor's already been modified, but I'm going to tear into it and show you the ins and outs of it. This is 33 that hasn't been modified. I already removed the float bowl on it just because I wanted to show you guys something on it. So we're just gonna shoot right from the hip and kind of walk you through these carburetors. It's a 33 Mikuni carburetor. Usually you find them on an 890 motor. So here at Blossom, typically what I do is I treat the carburetor as two different individuals. I treat it as the low idle circuit and the top end circuit. So you just divide those into half. And I always set up the idle circuit first to get the temperature, the head temperature that I desire at the starting line. And then after that, I set up the top end full throttle circuit. So we'll get right into it. So first thing first is we'll start taking the float bowl off on this one. Pretty simple, you just got the 4 screws, metric screws, take those out. And before you pull the bowl, I kind of hold the bowl up against the carburetor because it does have an accelerator pump and spring inside the bowl that if you pull it out, I guarantee you that spring's going to go underneath your bench and you more than likely will not find it. So taking the bowl off, as you can see, here's the accelerator pump and inside is the spring. So be careful not to lose that. This little brass piece that's sticking up, typically what I do to it is I just put it in the vise and I will pinch the very tip of it closed. That way you don't get any alcohol bouncing into that tube and dripping out of the tube there onto the racetrack. So really simple, just clamp it right down. That'll keep the alcohol from overflowing out of there. All right, so here we are into the carburetor. Let's talk a few parts. We'll look at the bottom of this, and the big jet right in the center is your main jet, and that is labeled as your high-end full throttle jet. The one right there to the side of it is your pilot jet, and that is your idle circuit. This screw right here regulates fuel, not air. So this is a fuel mixture screw. So out makes this carburetor fatter, in makes it leaner. So this is a fuel mixture screw, and this affects your idle circuit mainly. All right, we'll flip the carburetor over to the air horn. On the back side of the carburetor, you have an air jet. You have 2 air jets, one on the left and one on the right. The left one is your idle circuit. So that changes how much fuel that you are going to get at the idle circuit. It'll also affect top end, but it mainly affects your idle circuit. So the bigger number, the leaner it's going to be, the more air that it's going to let in. So it will lean the carburetor out. This one has a 0.8 in it right now. So let's just say I could only get the car up to 120 degrees. You could take that air jet and go higher, go to a 1.0, and that will get your head temp up at the starting line. Also, over on the right side is another air jet, and that is for your top end circuit. So usually how I figure out top end is whatever temperature that I get to at the starting line. Let's say it's 140 degrees at the starting line. So I want to check and see what my head temperature is at the finish line. So let's say I'm 140 at the starting line at staging. At the finish line, I want to gain anywhere from 100 to 130 degree head temp rise to the finish line. So 140 at the start, I want to be 240, 250, 260, 270 in that ballpark, and that at least gets you into the ballpark on tuning. Head temp is how we tune carburetors here at Blossom Racing. So if you ever give us a call and have questions about it, please know what your head temp is at the starting line, know what your head temp is at the finish line, and we will be able to guide you on what jets to change, what you may be looking for. So, all right, so let's get into this carburetor a little bit farther and take it apart. Right now I'm gonna just pull the main jet out. Once you pull the main jet out, there is a little brass fitting that holds the emulsion tube or the needle tube into the carburetor so it doesn't move, doesn't fall out. I've seen a couple carburetors come in without these even in, and then your emulsion tube basically floats up and down, changing how much fuel that it's regulating. So remove that, and then the pilot jet, we'll pull the pilot jet out. Now, one of the important aspects of the pilot jet is actually the hole under the pilot jet. If you look down in where you pulled the pilot jet out, there is another hole down there that goes into the center of the carburetor. In order to get more fuel at an idle circuit, people will drill that out. So when working on one of these carburetors, that's a very important thing to check to see what size hole that is down in the bottom of that pilot jet. Okay, let me jump over to the new carburetor that has not been modified yet. And if you see, this carburetor has a plastic shroud around the brass fitting that holds your emulsion tube in. Now, we typically cut ours off and take it right out of the equation. Too many times I have seen these plastic pieces fall off of this brass fitting and they get caught underneath your floats and pretty much ruin your day. So these really don't do anything for us. So we just get rid of them, get them out of the way, get that equation out of there. All right, back to the other carburetor. So now that we have the pilot jet out, the main jet out, we got to get the emulsion tube out. So on this carburetor, the only way to get the emulsion tube out is going to be through the top of the carburetor. So you have to remove this top that is on the carburetor. Just 2 screws. And it pops right off. Then inside on your slide arm, there is a bolt. I have a little wrench. I'll loosen it up and then pull that right out. Just like that. So far, so good. So all the parts that are in here. So this is the arm, and I don't know if you can see it, but I will show you in a minute. Right down here, there is a nylon washer that is in between the arm and the butterfly side of the carburetor, okay? All right, so the butterfly has a spring on it, and so that keeps it spring so it'll shoot back. So how I take that out is I usually just hold onto the back side of the spring right here, turn my butterfly just a little bit, pull it out, and out it comes. The push rod for the accelerator pump fell out. I'll just shove that right back in. Okay, so now that we got the butterfly and the arm all out, we will dump the slide And the emulsion tube actually came out with the slide. And here's that little nylon bushing that I was talking about. All right, so this emulsion tube on these, as you can see, these are all cross drilled right here. They have holes in them. And what those holes actually do is it makes this air jet on the right-hand side functional. So if this didn't have any holes in it, this air jet would be useless, okay? Just telling you that for the future when I do a video on the 42 carb. So, all right, so back at it. So now that we got it out, the emulsion tube. This is a gas emulsion tube. We'll take and you got to drill these out to make them work for alcohol. So another thing to measure would be the hole diameter inside the emulsion tube. Okay, now let me show you the tricky part of this carburetor. When we rebuild them, we usually don't have to take the floats out. But in this video, I'm just going to show you how to remove these floats safely so that you don't break this tower pin off. This tower pin right here on this side of the carburetor is the tower pin that will break off if you do this incorrectly. So the pin, here's the pin. This is the pin that holds it in. Here's the nail head side of the pin. So the pin is all the same size from the tip to about 1/16 of an inch away from the head of the pin or the nail head. At the nail head, the pin flares out. And the reason why it flares out is because it's a press fit on this tower pin. So when you take this tower pin out, I'll put the carburetor like this and I'll put my pin pusher right here, just like that, and I'll drive it out. But if I was to do this like this right here, lay it on my bench, try to drive it out, this tower pin would break off. Guarantee it. So the only way to prevent that from breaking off is to support it. I usually do it in my vise, so let me pull out a little bit here. Just like that. Take my hammer, and then I'm gonna take the carburetor and that tower pin that has the nail head side of the push pin, and I'm gonna barely slide it onto my vise until I hit the head of that push pin. So now that tower pin is supported because that's the pin, that's the tower side that's gonna get all the pressure on it before that pin comes out. Then you just take your push punch and slightly tap on it. And as you can see, the pin comes right out, just like that. Perfect. And then your floats come out with your needle, and there is your needle and seat down in there. Let me zoom back in a little bit. So let's remove that. Screwdriver, pull the needle and seat right out. Okay, now on a 33 stock, right from the manufacturer, when they come to you, they have this little screen on your needle and seat, right? So we typically remove them and do not run them because they will get plugged up with lint and dirt. So I wouldn't run one. Just make sure that you have screens and stuff on your alcohol jugs, you know, to keep all the the big chunks out. You're always going to get some lint in there. And then you can take your little screwdriver on your air jets right here, you know, remove them. Being that they're brass, do not over tighten them. It's just basically right down a little bit of a snug just to get them snug, okay? All right. So that is pretty much how you tear apart the whole 33 millimeter carburetor. Now, let's get back into reassembling it. So, start off, needle and seat, we'll slide that right back in, pops right down in there. Grab the screw. Tighten it right down. Grab your slide. Make sure that your needle is sitting on your little clip. Put that back down in there. And now putting the push pin back in. There's the head side of it. Basically come in right from the right side. Get it in there. And as you see, you'll try to push it in. It won't go all the way in. You can just take a hammer. I put my finger right there. And just nice little light taps until it goes in. You don't have to push it all the way in because when you put your float bowl back on, if you look, there's a ledge here, so that pin cannot come out. All right. So there's that. The floats are all back in. Setting the floats, a lot of people will talk about that. Here's how we set our floats. If you set it up just like this, hold up to it. This part, this flat arm right here, is usually level with the bottom of the bowl. That's typically where we set ours up at, okay? All right, so let's get back. The emulsion tube. So down in the port where the emulsion tube goes, there's a little pin down there. The emulsion tube has a slot right here. So you're gonna drop your thing down, your emulsion tube in there, line up that little pin. Once it gets lined up, you take a little screwdriver, poke it right in the end, then I can turn it, and boom, it pops right through. There's your emulsion tube. Make sure you wiggle it around so that it pops all the way down. Take your emulsion tube holder, a little brass piece, it sits right over the top of it. Your main jet screws right in. Again, don't over tighten it. We're talking about brass and aluminum here. Just a little grunt to just snug it. Grab your pilot jet. Get your pilot jet in there. Same thing. Slight little snug on it. So now I just double check, pilot jet's in, main jet, floats are all in, needles all in, screws in there, double checking everything. Everything looks good. All right. Grab my float bowl, make sure that my emulsion tube or my accelerator plunger and spring is in there. Make sure it operates. Set it right over top of it. Make sure your accelerator pump rod's in there. Push it right down. Get your screws back in there. Get the last screw in. And we'll get them all tightened down. little snug on them. All right, now the slide. Just keep in mind that modifying these carburetors, there's probably 100 different ways to modify them. One vendor will modify a carburetor this way, another vendor will modify a carburetor a completely different way. Some vendors will come in here to help raise the idle of the motor and lean it out a little bit. They'll actually notch. They'll put they'll copy this side here and put a little notch in the slide. So just a bunch of different ways to modify these. So that's why it's important when you call a vendor to discuss with them about your carburetor that you know what air jets it has in it, what pilot jets, what main jets. Check the size of the emulsion tube. The hole underneath the pilot jet is important. Look at the slide, see if it's been cut. All that information, give to the person that you're asking for help on it, and they will be able to advise you on which air jet you may need to change or what's going on. So slide, we're just gonna drop it right back down into the motor. Take your nylon washer, slide that right back down in between the arm and the butterfly side of the carburetor. If you look at your butterfly, it has this big flat piece on it, and then the other side has a little round barrel piece. So the flat part is the part that goes on the idle adjuster, okay? The things you have to be careful of is this little white accelerator pump piece. When you push this back in, a lot of people will not move this out of the way and it'll break the tip of it right off. So you can see the mark right here on the butterfly where the idle adjuster actually makes contact. So slide that back in just like that with this up. Line up your nylon washer inside. Line up your arm inside and push it in. Don't push in hard. It's going to come to a stop. And the reason why it stopped is because right here, that brass piece is hitting on that white accelerator arm. So I'll come in here and I'll push that accelerator arm out of the way and then push the butterfly and the whole arm all the way in. So now it's all the way in. I'm just gonna hold it with my thumb so it doesn't slide back out. Come in here with my bolt, put it in, line it up, screw it back down, grab my wrench, give it a nice little tug, tighten it up. And now all we have to do with that is hook up the spring. So I close this all the way and I'm gonna hold it right there, right where the idle adjuster hits. I'm holding it right there. Now I'm gonna take my screwdriver in right here through the butterfly and I'm gonna grab a hold of the spring. If you can see the spring right there. So right in like this, grab the spring. I'm gonna use the butterfly to pry it. When I get this far, I have to kind of jimmy it around the cable holder part, put it back down, and hold it on the piece where the spring hooks. And then I take my screwdriver and make sure my spring is all bound out. So right there. Now that is operating, everything's good. Gonna put the top back on, or you can put the, the aftermarket billet tops on it. Tighten it down, and there you go. So that's pretty much a 33 millimeter carburetor. Kind of talked a little bit about the components on what does what. Hopefully this video helps you guys out, and hope to see you guys again on the next video. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day. Take care, guys.